What's up, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. And know that Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand, so find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. Cam Smith rolling with my guy, CHSN Bulls insider KC Johnson, hopping on the pod to give those gems and that knowledge as he always does. But KC, I got to check in with you just personally, man. How you doing, man? It's been a little minute since I've seen you in person. I've just been out and away from the United Center.
Yeah, I'm doing well. A little over caffeinated, which is good for podcasting. So, no, it's it was a crazy start to the season. I mean, you and Drew got into it last podcast. That November schedule was pretty wild. Not only in terms of number of games, but a lot of in and out trips. So there's a lot of travel, and this month it calms down a little bit. And I will say, on a personal level, it's kind of cool to be in D.C. last week for the Wizards game because my son attends college out there, so I got to see my son, and then obviously over the Thanksgiving break too. So a lot of good stuff around the Bulls beat, and I know we're going to get into some stuff on this podcast today.
Look, KC, D.C. is one of my favorite cities. My wife and I love going to D.C. We have family and friends out there, and it's just one of those cities, especially in the summertime. I think everybody feels this way about their particular city in the summer. We know this as Chicagoans, but it's one thing about D.C. where it's just it just brightens, it blossoms, man. And maybe I'm kind of like doing a little corny thing to the cherry blossom trees out there in D.C., but it's a beautiful city. I love it all the time every time we go.
Yeah, and it's expensive, so I need a loan.
No, man. Hey, look, we definitely lean on family and friends in terms of those hotel expenses to make sure that we're staying with them and not staying at hotels, because DC is basically like New York when it comes to the expenses, for sure. I feel you on that. So, all right. So, I mean, when you think about this Bulls team and moving forward, and as you said, it's been a weird and wacky season just in terms of the schedule and how it's played out. But just piggybacking off of what we did with the previous podcast with Drew and I, and we highlighted certain points with Matas Buzelis, who had a career night the other night at the United Center against the Brooklyn Nets. And we have to throw in the disclaimer that Brooklyn had basically half their team out with guys dealing with some kind of injury, but still opened up an opportunity for Matas to showcase himself. But a career high 20 points, KC, and watching that game and looking at Matas, we know that he's fearless and he has that insane confidence about himself. But this is the first time for me where he's looked comfortable out there on the court. Like he didn't second guess his movements on defense and also on the offensive end.
Yeah, and I think the most impressive thing about the performance, Cam, was that it came on the heels of probably his most disappointing performance of the season in that Celtics game where he got thrown in the deep end with the premier wings in the league in Tatum and Brown. And, he sank and he didn't play in the second half. And we'll get into a little bit about Billy Donovan's usage of him coupled off that. But that response from that performance in the Celtics game is what stood out to me. And sure, yes, I mean, one game you're saying he's going up against elite players and sinking, and then he's going up against a shorthanded Nets team and swimming. But to me, it's still about the response for a 20-year-old first-round pick. And the decisiveness stood out to me. And I'm glad you brought the defense, because that is, to me, what is so jumping out about what the Bulls are trying to impress upon Matas is his performance needs to go beyond shot making, because, obviously it's a make or miss league. Things are always going to look better when the ball goes in like he shot it against the Nets. But he can impact the game regardless of if he's making shots, as long as he's taking the right shots, as long as he's running the floor hard in transition. And as to your point, as those defensive instincts, I think he's got a really, really bright future and potential as a shot blocker. He's got really good natural defensive instincts. His rotations, to me, are advanced for his age. He sees things on the weak side that you don't always see from a rookie. And then obviously he's got that length and athleticism to finish the play. So if you're a Bulls fan, there's a lot to like for this kid. And obviously he's got to learn the league and get stronger. But I just like his demeanor. I like his attitude. And obviously his stats against the Nets were fantastic.
You talk about his instincts on the defensive end, and you pair that with his athleticism. That, to me, that's just half the battle there, because when you think of instincts, it's the basketball IQ and the mentality of being on the court, of when to, jump a passing lane or to rotate to get those blocks. And speaking of the blocks that he had against the Brooklyn Nets, he was the only player with multiple blocks in that game with too. So, and that's what I speak of, just the confidence that he's starting to grow and develop, right? And so when you have a guy that, had his lessons, and he had a major test against the Boston Celtics, as you mentioned, facing off against Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, he was humbled in certain situations, but knowing Matas and just his insane confidence, and I mean that in the most respectful way with Matas and his insane confidence, is that I'm sure he got back into the lab, which he always does, watches films, and wants to get better for that next showing. And that was Brooklyn and at the United Center. So he's a guy that understands that I have to earn my minutes. And this is something that he's known since he was drafted by the Bulls last June, but also a guy that understands that once I get my spot and my time, I have to make sure that I'm putting out the effort on the defensive end, and then also making shots, which he did against Brooklyn as well, to continue to stay in that rotation, but not only stay in that rotation, but play the minutes that he's getting. I mean, you're looking at a guy, KC, that when you look at this Bulls team off of the bench, it brings an interesting question, because we know that Patrick Williams has ramped up his workouts and he's set to return at some point. But how does that impact Billy Donovan's rotation with Matas? Because you want to make sure that you still hone in on the confidence and the growth of Matas with what we've seen, and also make it work with Patrick Williams when he returns to bring him his minutes. So how do you see that dynamic playing out when Patrick Williams finally returns?
Yeah, and Billy Donovan's pointed to this really from the jump, is that he's got a lot on his plate in terms of development minutes and juggling different players. I mean, Julian Phillips is in that mix as well. And this is obviously with Torrey Craig not in the rotation, who, when you put him in there, the dude produces pretty much every time because he's such a savvy veteran. But look, I mean, Billy Donovan's talked about two things: sacrifice, and you see that in the guard rotation as well. I mean, not everyone's probably going to play the minutes they want to play. He's got to spread it out. And then number two, that fine line between development minutes and entitlement minutes. And this is where I think Billy Donovan and his coaching staff have been spot on, is like, you saw it in that Celtics game. Like, he threw Matas out there against elite players, and Matas didn't perform well, and Billy pulled him. And, the thing I like about Matas and his response is he is not a blame caster. He looks inward. And you mentioned the film study. I know for a fact, 'cause I've talked to him about it, he is a voracious film hound, and he goes and sees what Billy Donovan saw. And that's a guy who wasn't ready to play. And it goes beyond, like, again, missed shots, or you're going to have an occasional game plan mistake. Those are going to happen for all players, particularly young players. But when you're not boxing out, or you're not running the floor hard in transition, those are things you can control regardless of who you're playing against, your opponent. And those are the teaching moments that, to me, transcend that fine line between entitlement minutes and development minutes. I've never been a fan of entitlement minutes. I know fans say, oh, just throw him out there 25 minutes a night, and the Bulls aren't going anywhere. He's got to develop. I don't agree with that. I think you can learn from being on the bench or getting pulled from a game and then going, oh, you know what? I got to go look at the film because I just got yanked from the game and I didn't see the court in the second half. So that's just, maybe I'm wrong. I understand both sides of the equation, but that's where I fall on it. I'm not a fan of entitlement minutes. I remember way back when Scott Skiles used to talk about this same dynamic with guys like Eddie Curry and Tyson Chandler in the early aughts. And I just personally think the staff has done a great job with Matas, and the fact that it ties into him looking inward, to me, is where it all kind of comes in a full circle and tied together perfectly.
No, KC, you're on the right side of things when it comes to earning the minutes and also the entitlement minutes, because you're a real hooper, KC, and real hoopers know that, look, we want to have guys out there that understand that when you go like a guy in Matas' situation, the rookie, 20-year-old, 11th overall pick, he has some pressure on his shoulders, but at the same time, you want him to learn and develop. But if you're just throwing him out there just to throw him out there, then you start to disrupt a little chemistry with his team, and guys are viewing him differently in terms of, what he is and what he's going to do, because you have veterans out there like a Torrey Craig, or even a guy, Julian Phillips, that's still developing himself going into his second year, or in the second year now. But these guys want to make sure that the group that's out there is on one accord, especially on the defensive end. But if you're having a young guy out there, especially, that just out there because he needs minutes and he's the 11th overall pick, that's not going to sit well within that locker room. So it's the earned minutes. It's the minutes that Matas has earned from Billy Donovan the reasons why we saw him out there playing 20-plus minutes against the Brooklyn Nets, because he's putting in the work. He's a guy that's learning and talking to guys on the bench and having those relationships. There's so many times that I see when the camera's on the Bulls bench of a Javon Carter or a Torrey Craig or a Julian Phillips, when they're on the bench with Matas, they're speaking to him. And it's not just them speaking to him, it's Matas speaking to them and asking questions, wanting to learn and develop. And that's part of the development as well, is that he's seeking advice from those veterans so that he can be better prepared out there on the court and that he can learn. And so that's all a part of that growth that he's going through with the Chicago Bulls. And to your point, the coaching staff and the front office is doing a great job of bringing him along to a point where it's a natural growth instead of a forced growth. And that's what I think the Bulls want to stay away from, because he's one of the cornerstones of this franchise moving forward with the future that they're trying to build.
For sure. And I'm glad you brought up the asking questions, Cam, because Billy Donovan actually pointed to that recently as a sign of Matas's growth. And again, this speaks to what we're talking about. Your growth can happen and your development can happen in moments away from playing time. And as far as the entitlements, one more point about that, like you know this, like to me, if you don't sometimes hold them accountable for mistakes, they can fall into bad habits. And to me, bad habits form when you are granted entitlement minutes. But to the point about development in the off-court situations, Billy Donovan has said Matas is starting to ask more questions. And there were times earlier in the season where he would exit a huddle and go like, yeah, I got it. But he was kind of BSing. And now he's like, hey, if they do this, we're doing this, right? And so he's starting to ask the right questions. And that, again, is another sign of growth. And then one last point I wanted to make about the defensive stuff, and I've said this on on our Chicago Sports Network broadcast before, but I go back to a sit-down I did with him shortly after he was drafted, and you talk about how much of a hooper this guy is and how much he likes film study. The name he brought up to me, I still can't get over this. He brought up Andrei Karolinko as a defensive guy and like a goal. I know, it's like, talk about old school, man.
Yeah, that's definitely old school right there with AK.
I know, exactly, a different AK. And yeah, but like if you talk about, a guy who also had pretty good weak side instincts and shot blocking, and wasn't the most overpowering physical guy, but uses his length and athleticism to be a pretty good defender. I mean, that comp blew me away. I mean, that shows you, number one, how much of a fan he is. Number two, how much of a film study junkie he is. So, yeah, I mean, to me, again, there's a lot of potential at both sides of the ball. But one thing that I think you can really consistently see is his defensive instincts. And I think he's got potential to be a really good shot blocker.
Yeah, the studying of the game, of obviously his clips and his games, but also looking at the past guys that have done it at a high level, like Andrei Karolinko. I mean, just even thinking about Andrei Karolinko, I'm just thinking of when he would catch the ball off the wing or even on the baseline, KC, he was just so lethal at attacking the rim just because of the athleticism and the size there. So I've seen that, a little bit of that in Matas as well, in terms of what he can do with his athleticism. And I think that's another part where Bulls fans really enjoy is, one, Matas on the break. And that's one reason why Billy Donovan and the coaching staff want him to run hard in transition, because he can have those highlight moments, but also that eases him into the game when you get a guy that can naturally do what he does best, and that's attack the rim and make plays at the rim. Then that just eases his his nerves in the ball game when you can get a dunk, right? We've seen that so many times with young guys in the NBA, where if they can just put their hands on the rim, it just calms everything down. So Matas is one of those guys where you just saw a little bit of that against Brooklyn, where it's not even just the dunks, but also just him getting comfortable with the shot and just not hesitating on those catch and shoots. And so those are things for me on the offensive end that is standing out. And you mentioned the defensive standpoints or side points of him just being able to be a guy that can read things off the ball and make the right rotations to help this Bulls team. So you're doing that because you're watching film and you're asking questions and you wanting to get better and learn more from your teammates and also the coaching staff. So I know that Billy Donovan and the coaching staff are just like, yes, we have a young guy that gets it. He understands it. He's going to be in the film room because he genuinely wants to get better and work at his game. And so you saying that you talked to him and brought up Andrei Karolinko. I brought this up on the podcast with Drew, but I go back to the insane confidence of Matas. It's a little Mamba mentality that he has with that, Casey. I want to know if you feel the same with Matas, because in those conversations that you've had with him, and then conversations that I had with him during media day, and I asked him a question like, what's your favorite hangout spot in Chicago? And this is the savviness of Matas at a young age. He's just like, one, I know he had a spot in his head, but he wasn't going to reveal that because that spot gets blown up and then he can't go there anymore. But he says that, you know what? I really don't go out. The gym is my hangout spot. Like, I'm always trying to do something to better my game. And so that's why I get back to a piece of that being the Mamba mentality, and then also him just with the insane confidence of, I don't care if I turn the ball over the previous play. Once I get it again, I'm going to attack and just act like that previous play didn't happen. And so that's why I go back to him being cut from a different cloth mentally, of understanding what is needed of him and how he just carries himself on that court. So do you see a little bit, just if you kind of squint one eye and lean in really closely, a little bit of the Mamba mentality from Matas, or not Mamba mentality, but maybe that insane confidence that he has about himself in his game?
No, I'm definitely going to go Mamba, because in that same sit down that I referenced the Andre Karolinko comment, here's a direct quote that obviously I will never forget. He said, I asked him about his personality. I said, I'm just getting to know you, but you seem like a pretty chill guy. And he said, yeah, but on the court, I want to kill you.
Ooh, okay.
And this was in the summer, so this was before our network started. So, I'm bringing it to this network now. But I mean, that quote jumps out at you, and it goes back to what we talked about. He likes to talk smack. I mean, he stared down John Moran after he made the three. I mean, he's got an irrational, kind of competitiveness and confidence on the court. And again, it stems to me from your ability to look inward and accept failure and want to get better. You've seen it with his approach to G League assignments. He's like, I'll do it because I know they're just doing it to try to help me get better, but I don't want to stay there. I belong at the NBA level. So I like that response too. So again, we're kind of, we're spreading a lot of goodwill right now with Matas, but to me, that's because, as you mentioned, he's a foundational piece moving forward. And number one and number two, between his mentality and some of the glimpses you've seen, there's a lot to like. So that's why this is a good chunk of this podcast, because you're not going to always have 20-point games from him, but if you have that mentality and that response and that kind of mindset, there's going to be more good moments than bad this season for him.
I'm just going to throw out one more quote from Matas. At the time, I was working with Stadium Network, and Matas had to sit down with Shams Charania before the NBA draft, and it was doing the pre-draft, and he challenged eventually overall number one pick Zachary Ricochet to a one-on-one, and wanted coaches and GMs to be there, and he wanted to prove that he was the number one overall pick. So again, going back to that irrational, insane confidence, Matas has it, man. Like he wants all the smoke and is unafraid of anybody out there. It doesn't matter if you're Zachary Ricochet, the number one overall pick of the Atlanta Hawks, or even bringing it up to some of the best in the league like LeBron James. So it's going to make it interesting when the Bulls match up against the Lakers, and when Matas gets checked on to LeBron and see what he does there, or Kevin Durant, or just some of the elite forwards and players that we've seen in this game. So we just hope that Matas continues to develop, and he will do that just because he's doing all the right things and putting in the work to do that. But he's going to have his drop-offs at some point, right? Because he is a rookie, and we've seen those moments happen, but you still want to continue to see him just be a guy that gets better and continuously gets better to move this franchise forward. And so salute to Matas. We saw some bright lights against the Brooklyn Nets, and trying to see if he can push it forward, because the Bulls schedule in the month of December continues on. And it makes it interesting, KC, because as wild as this season and this Bulls schedule has been, 12 games in the month of December, but there's going to be some breaks and a chunk of breaks in terms of like 3-4 days off where this team can finally get some serious practice sessions in. So when you look at this Bulls schedule with the 12 games that they have in the month of December, what team do you think we will see finishes out the 2024 calendar year? Well, I mean,
to me, the thing that jumps out, and we should get to the news that most people probably know, is that now they have the 2 games added officially from the NBA Cup, not qualifying for the NBA Cup knockout round. They are playing the Hornets at home on December 13th at 7 p.m. And then the Raptors on the road December 16th at 6:30 p.m. Central will be our broadcast time. And look, beyond the opponents, on paper being winnable games, to me, this whole schedule just opens up now, because I mean, every team has stretches of the schedule that are very challenging, and every team has times where they complain to the league office about, okay, that didn't seem very fair. I mean, that's just part of the NBA.
Yeah.
But I will say I've been doing this a long time, and that November was as taxing of a month as I've seen, because the Bulls were never really in one place at one time. They were not on the road for extended trips. They were not at home for extended periods. It was a lot of in and out, either a game here, jumping on a plane, a game there, some weird time change back-to-backs. It was a lot, and they navigated it probably better than a lot of people thought. So, yeah, to your point, Cam, you got 12 games, and I'm looking at, we're taping this on the Wednesday before the road trip to San Antonio later today for a game tomorrow. After that, they are home for a solid 10 days until they go to Toronto for that recently added game. And so, that is what they need, because you've heard Billy Donovan and the coaching staff talk about lack of practice time. And all teams have stretches like that. But, I mean, I think I'm not joking, I think I covered two or three practices in the entire month of November at the Advocate Center.
Wow.
I mean, there were shoot-arounds and walkthroughs, but in terms of actual practices, I think I covered 2, maybe 3. I'd have to look at my notes. So that just tells you how crazy that schedule was. So this is a real opportunity for the Bulls, and I'm curious to see how they take advantage of it.
Yeah, I'm with you as well, KC, because you can try and get back to some fundamental things, especially on the defensive end with this team, to get that just re-implemented into your attack and when you're matching up against opponents. And we discussed this, you and I have on the By the Horns podcast, and Drew and I have discussed this as well. But you're having essentially practice time during live games, and that makes it tough. And I'm not trying to make excuses for this team when it comes to the turnovers, but you're looking at certain situations with guys chemistry-wise not being in right positions, but then also guys attacking the paint and leaving their feet and not even looking at the rim. I think that practice can help with that. Of course, it would help if you just go and attack the rim and try and go to score, not leave your feet too past. But this is a very essential time for this team moving forward in the month of December to really tighten up some things and then also refresh the players and also the coaching staff on what the objective is. More so on the defensive end. I think offensively, you bring that in, but you're still looking at a team offensively that has had its bright spots, but things get out of hand defensively when you have teams like you talked about in November, when they had that stretch against Cleveland, against the Cavaliers in Cleveland, and then that Sunday against Houston at the United Center where they're giving up 140 plus points. So you can shore up that end and just refresh guys on what the objective is on that end of the floor.
Yeah, and as far as the defensive end, I mean, one thing you've consistently heard through the first, month and change of the season is the communication issues, and you can't get that as much in film sessions. You can point out times where it's lacking, but in terms of actually working on the communication, you need to be on the practice floor. And so, I mean, let's just start with the fact they're dropping from 17 games in the month of November to 12 games in the month of December. I mean, that's a huge difference right there. And then obviously more home games than road games, which is, different than the flipping it from November. So, again, to your point, the communication issues at the defensive end, the turnover issues at the offensive end. And we're not, when Billy would bring this up or the players would bring this up, they weren't making excuses. They were just kind of more saying it was like their reality is they need practice time. And so, I mean, I did not have the Bulls at, let's see, they're 9-13. I would not have predicted them to be 9-13 this stretch. So, you've got an opportunity now with a more favorable schedule, 12-game schedule in December to maybe, get closer to 500, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I'm with you, KC. I mean, you have the opportunity against San Antonio in San Antonio. I know that Victor Wembanyama exists, and he's not human. I will forever say that. I'm just waiting for the day where he pulls off his mask and reveals that he is an actual alien. But it's a winnable game there against the Spurs team that has their issues, obviously, going through it. If you can solve the equation of Wembanyama and also Chris Paul, who's one of the leaders, I believe, this NBA season in double-doubles when it comes to points and assists, is still turning back the hands of time there. And San Antonio has some young pieces. Stephon Castle, top 5 pick for the Spurs. I believe he went 4th overall to San Antonio. So they have some guys there that can play, but also it's a winnable game for this Bulls team. And I'm going to throw in the Charlotte Hornets. We talked about Toronto as well, but even thinking about Atlanta and how the Bulls have played well against the Hawks, they've been exciting games and maybe too close than what they should be, high-scoring games, but the Bulls have done well against the Hawks. The Hornets, again, the Wizards, we've seen what they were able to do against the Knicks in New York at Madison Square Garden. Obviously, that's going to be a different night. That's even getting into January as I'm getting ahead of myself there. But getting back to December, they have some games that are very winnable that can get them to 500. But getting back to the practice standpoint, especially on the defensive end, it's great that Billy Donovan will be able to tell guys and really blow the whistle and say, hey, hold up. This is exactly what I'm discussing and what we want to stay away from. And you talked about the communication point, but also the straight line drives that we've heard Billy talk when it comes to guys on ball and then also rotations. He's just saying that too many times guys are getting beat off the dribble and you can't have that. And you make exceptions for guys like Donovan Mitchell or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, guys like that, or Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown. But there are too many times this team is getting beat on straight line drives. So I think the practice component will help Billy Donovan re-emphasize and reiterate the points of, hey, we cannot allow that play right there to happen where we're getting beat and there's no rotation or backside help. So we could possibly, as you mentioned, see this team get to 500 after the month of December and maybe even get over that with those 12 games. But it'll be interesting to see health-wise too, guys coming back, of how things are implemented with their schedule as they get through this month of December.
Well, one thing I said closer to 500 because you mentioned a lot of games, but you didn't mention the 2 against the Celtics and the 2 against.
I did not. I was trying to stay away from KC. I saw that because it's a tough stretch when you go from December 19th to the 23rd with 2 against Boston, and then you got the Milwaukee Bucks who are playing really great basketball. Especially
so 4 of the 12, a third of the games are against elite opponents for the conference. So. But look, we want to see what they have. I mean, I thought one of their best games of the season was that first Celtics matchup. I mean, they played fantastic that night. They just didn't win, but that was a very competitive game. They were trading blows and trading 3-pointers offensively with the Celtics, and obviously Boston just made more plays at the end. So, yeah, I mean, it's always fun to see how it plays out. One last point about the defense before we get out of here. To your point about straight line drives, I mean, one thing that Billy keeps talking about is they're getting beat off like the first dribble. So we've got to do a better job of guarding the first dribble. I always kind of cringe and turn my head when he says that because that was like my bane as a player. I was terrible. I was like,
wait a minute. Are we finding out the scouting report?
Yeah, I was like,
Casey Johnson, the basketball player, just like, all right, just.
I was like, I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel the player's pain there. But I mean, you can see it. There are times where I mean, this is not schematic. This is just you're in space. You sometimes have to just take pride in getting better on ball with one dribble and limiting the damage of the first dribble. And that's something you can get into, obviously in film sessions, but better you can get into it on the practice court.
Yeah, definitely. All right, KC. I'm just glad that we got a little scouting report on Casey Johnson, the basketball player right there defensively. Hey, Luke, you know what, KC? And you're doing, if you're watching this on YouTube, KC's making the shooting motion right there. If you're not, he's doing the shooting motion. But that was not my game. The scouting report on Cam Smith was sag off of him. If he gets a ball in rotation on a swing, he can knock it down, but close out short on Cam, playing for the drive and not the jump shot.
All right. I'm guessing you were a better defender than me, though.
I was definitely a guy that was a defender, especially going to Southern Illinois, where defense was for sure our motto there. So if you didn't defend, you weren't on the court. But certain players have certain flaws in their game, and my flaw was the lack of outside shooting. But
did you see the hand that I was shooting with, by the way? All the shootings are lefty, man.
Hey, KC, that's why I'm jealous of you when it comes to being a basketball player, because I always envy left-handed basketball players. I've never seen a awkward left-handed player. Everything is so smooth with you guys, man. And also it just brought hell to everyone that's right-handed because it's all opposite. I can't force you left because that's your dominant hand.
What's crazy is that the only thing I do is throw a baseball and shoot a basketball lefty. I do everything else right-handed. So I can hit you with either hand, Cam.
All right, okay.
You say you're defensive. We got to get on the court. Oh, wait, I'm 57. I don't go.
Hey, you know what, KC? The way my knees are set up, man, I maybe have a good few minutes left in me on the court, man. So we got to get this open gym going when it comes to our team, man. Get Jason Goff and Kendall Gill and Drew Stevens out there and try and get some runs, man. So just hopefully everybody can leave healthy. That's the biggest point. It's not about buckets or getting steals. It's about leaving healthy. All right.
Did you say Phoenix Gill or Kendall Gill?
And shout out to Phoenix because he's putting in work for St. Ignatius, undefeated for the Wolfpack. So shout out to him. But yeah, we'll see if we can get that something done down the line. Maybe when it gets warmer outside, when the muscles and the bones are warmed up and feeling better. We can't do anything in the wintertime, man. It's too cold for that stuff.
Amen.
All right. That will do it for this edition of the By the Horns podcast presented by Toyota. Toyota has more all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive vehicles than any other brand. So make sure you find yours and shine on. Toyota, let's go places. For our CHSN Bulls insider, KC Johnson, I'm Cam Smith. Thank you for tapping in with us. We'll talk to you soon.